Well, hello there, and welcome back to the Terri Cole Show. I am so glad that you are tuning in today right here on YouTube. I'm going to start with a couple of questions. At work, do you feel like you're overworking without feeling satisfied? Do you have difficulty accepting praise and acknowledging success? Like if someone says good job, or you're like, yeah, but it could have been better. Do you feel like you suffer from perfectionism? Do you have, this is a real telltale sign, a desire for visibility, but a fear of that same visibility? Like you want to be recognized, but it somehow is bringing up fear to be recognized. And do you have difficulty asserting authority over your clients? If you're nodding your head yes, then you're going to love this episode of the Terri Cole Show where I'm asking you this question. Hey, is your inner child running your business life? That is the question, and that is what we're going to be talking about, is giving you some questions to answer to see if that's happening for you, and then giving you some ideas of what you can do so that this is not the case in your life. Okay, before we get into it, if you're new to my channel, please say hello, introduce yourselves in the comments. We are a friendly group. Make sure that you subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you get the new stuff that I roll out every Tuesday and every Thursday. And thank you for being here, because if there was no you, there would be no Terri Cole Show. I'll tell you that right now. All right, let's move it on into today's content, shall we? I think we shall. Okay, so what does it look like when the inner child is running your work life? So we can start with not feeling satisfied. It's sort of like overworking, but not feeling satisfied with what you're doing. So the early messages in childhood, if you have a childhood wound of a worthiness wound, an abandonment wound, a rejection wound, this sense, this fear of being not enough as a child, it creates a phenomenon at work where we will overwork and over-deliver, and I definitely suffered from this when I was younger. So how does that happen? Well, if you don't feel accepted and valued in childhood for who you were, if there was neglect, if people weren't there, if you were left on your own, if people were critical and mean, our sense of self gets really skewed. So we don't have accurate sense of self. So we overwork because we don't feel like we are enough, right? So overworking and over-delivering is an indication that, like, I don't feel like doing the right amount, doing what's in my contract, doing what I'm being paid to do, like my actual job description. How much of the time are you doing more than those things? That can really be leftover from childhood wounding. Another part of this is seeking approval through achievements, right? We're looking to quench that underlying need to be seen. So in my case, I always, because of my own father wound, I felt not good enough, right? I felt not enough. I thought he wanted a boy. I thought it was the wrong gender. And so I always over-delivered and over-functioned. And in some ways, you guys, listen, you can heal from these things, and that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode. But those tendencies, like I've been in therapy for 30 years, and I still have a tendency to over-deliver on things. And that's not a humble brag. That's the truth. And it's exhausting, so I work on it. I'm better, of course, than I was in my 20s, but it's exhausting. Seeking approval through achievement is really tiresome. You just want to be accepted for who you are. And although I have that in my marriage, it's interesting how in work, it's almost like I transferred my father wound to my career, because that was one thing that I had in common with him, was business success. So it was something we could sort of talk about and agree on. Another thing that you'll see if your inner child is running your business or your career is using perfectionism in an attempt to protect yourself from criticism, from confrontation, from being rejected. So avoiding criticism through trying to be perfect. And that talk about fucking exhausting. Like, that is exhausting. And there is no perfection and there is no flawlessness. Like, it just doesn't exist. So it's a losing proposition from the jump, this whole thing with perfectionism. And of course, you guys, I've done other episodes on perfectionism, because it is especially in this community. Many of us suffer from this, and it really does like suck the joy out of life. And then the irony of it all is that it actually doesn't protect you, because there is no such thing as being perfect, you know? Another thing that gets in the way when the inner child is running the show is that success itself, even when you're really successful, it doesn't feel the way you want it to feel. It's like we have our own moving goalposts where you never seem to make it, you know, and sometimes I still suffer from this, right? No matter, and I see this in my husband as well. And of course, you know, we both had lots of years of therapy, and we've obviously been working on these things, but, you know, there's still a tendency, even when you're successful, to feel like you need to do more. And I know when I'm striving in that way, because it's more of a grind. It's different. When I'm in a flow and I'm feeling good about what I'm doing and I'm feeling masterful and I know that I know what I'm doing and I'm writing a book that I'm really excited about or whatever it is, it's not a grind. It's a joy. Like, it's something I'm psyched to be doing. And it's different when I was grinding for approval, right? Even when I was in entertainment, when I was a talent agent, the energy that went along with that, even though when I was in a masterful position, if I was, let's say, negotiating a big contract and getting a big deal and felt like I had done a great job for the client, there would still be that achievement high that would come, but it wouldn't last. So the problem when the inner child is running the show is that you're only as good as your last big deal that you've done. And when you create more internal health, when you create more self-worth that actually is sourced from you and not just from doing or achievements or other people's approval, you don't need that kind of success. You can still want to be successful, but you're not driven by this vortex, this emptiness, this longing. And when we are driven by that, the work is never going to be satisfying, because the thing is, no amount of working can fill the hole that only self-love and self-validation and self-worth can fill. Moving on to other signs and symptoms that the inner child is running the show is people-pleasing patterns in professional relationships. I recently had someone in my mastermind group talking about a relationship with a very important vendor in her life, someone who gave her a lot of business, but was really inappropriate and had bad boundaries and would call her at off hours and all of this stuff. And through our work together and through the support of the mastermind, she was able to just have a very, very small conversation with this guy. And it completely transformed their relationship. And I really feel like, you guys, you know, when we learn to get away from the people pleasing, I mean, she'd been working with this guy for years. So she was really, really sick of his shit, like for real, sick of it. And got to the point where it didn't matter. Right? Because we always play out like the worst case scenario. So what happens if you say something to Larry and then Larry takes all his business away? Will you be okay? And the answer was yes. So we're like, okay. So that's your answer. Because continuing to put up with his, what felt like to her, inappropriate comments, asking her if she got her period, like those types of things, that she had gotten too healthy for it. She couldn't tolerate it anymore. So when you pivot those people-pleasing patterns, and someone like this, you know, guy, Larry, quote unquote, a lot of times he really probably thought she enjoyed their banter, quote unquote, because we know how effing clueless people can be. But it's not their job to decode us. It's our job to give them a mother clue so that we're in relationships with people and they are respecting our boundaries. And when you're a people pleaser, you're never asserting your boundaries enough. You're not doing it in the way that you need to be doing it so that people understand. And listen, he could just as easily, Larry, have been a jerk about it and said, oh, you don't like that? You're a snowflake and blah, blah. But he didn't. He said, oh, do you think we should have a more professional relationship? And all she said was, yes, please. And that changed. And that was a couple of weeks ago. And so the point is, you can change. But I can see with this particular person that it's also lining up perfectly as she heals her inner child in the mastermind is when she was able to step into this grown-up conversation and be solid. And just that alone obviously has already changed the quality of her life. We talk about it every week, like, how are you feeling? She's like, work is amazing because I don't have this one person who was bringing me down. Other things to give you indications that the inner child might be running the show is, do you have money scripts from childhood that impact or affect how you're pricing your goods or your services? You might be in a different kind of business, but that's something to look out for. Because if we have unhealed childhood wounds, if we have inner child work to do, we can carry that, especially if you grew up in poverty or if you grew up where money was erratic. Sometimes your family had it, sometimes you didn't. Sometimes the lights were being shut off, sometimes they weren't. That is really hard to shake unless you do it on purpose, because for kids, that type of any kind of food insecurity, it really hits deep. And it doesn't go. It's interesting. I see with my husband he's got a lot of secondary trauma because his mother was actually in a Russian prison camp after the war. The Russians came and took the able-bodied Germans who were left to go, and Hungarians to go into these work camps. So she was essentially starved. She lived, but it was a very bad. I should do a whole podcast on that. See if Vic would be willing to talk about it. But anyway, I can see that the food insecurity. So she, somehow made it to the States, ended up having Vic, and before she passed away, I was close to her, and she just loved with food. Like there was always a lot of food. She was an amazing cook. She was an incredible baker, but it was very important. And my husband, you will never run out of anything at my house. I can see his response or reaction to that food insecurity trauma that his mother had passed down, even though he always had food growing up. But it was almost like the lack that she experienced, and she told him all about the camps and all of that, so there wasn't a lot of protection there. His way, so the little kid is running him when it comes to food shopping, because if one box of that is good, 15 is better, So a lot of times I have to be so specific and be like, babe, we only need one of these. Please do not buy a whole pack, or do not. But I can actually see it coming out. Other things to think about is simple. This is stuff that we see in the rest of our lives as well, which is fear of taking up space, right? Being too much. And being, I could see it with my clients with unhealed childhood wounds when they come in, not wanting to be a target, especially if they came from a family system where there was someone who was scary, erratic, a bully. It's almost like wanting to go under the radar. They don't want to be too visible. It's like inviting trouble. But the problem with that is that if you're smart, if you're accomplished, if there's things you have to add, it's an inner conflict all the time. Because of course there is a part of you, the grown-up part, the healthy part, that does want to be visible, that does want to be seen, because that's totally normal and natural. Another telltale sign is having the imposter syndrome. These types of unhealed wounds that are about belonging and competence, which many of ours are, they can lead to the imposter syndrome. Now, I feel like having some of the imposter syndrome is very normal. Like getting a new job, you may feel like, wow, am I really up to this? Like moments of having the imposter syndrome, I think are really normal. It's if you feel it all the time, like sort of a pervasive fear of being found out, that is more coming from an unresolved, and that's when the inner child is running the show. So part of the most powerful thing that you can do if you identified with any of these things is we have to reparent ourselves in the business, right? So we have to do it in our life as well. So reparenting, what does that look like? That means self-consideration. Taking yourself into consideration in your life for everything. Rest when you're tired. Nourish yourself with good food. Care how you feel. Have good boundaries with the people in your life. In business, I want you to make a whole list of where, from this list that I've been talking about, and I'll put this in the guide, don't worry, terricole.com/guide, of where do you feel like the inner child is running the show? In what areas that we talked about? And what would reparenting look like? Sometimes it's just reassuring ourselves, right? It's like sometimes I feel like even though I've had a lot of success in my life, when it comes to like interacting professionally in like these higher education type places, I feel a little bit like I have the imposter syndrome. And I get worried of like, I'm not worried about what you guys think because I know what you think. Like I feel like what I'm putting out is helping you. So that's what I care about. And if I'm in a professional situation, sometimes I'll feel a little bit like, oh, I wonder if my colleagues think I'm a hack. You know what I mean? Like it's momentary, but I will soothe myself. I will say, Terri, relax. Of course not. Nobody's judging. People aren't even thinking about you. Don't worry about it. Like I'll say things, but in a soothing way, rather than like, why are you thinking that? Don't be an idiot. In a way that having a father wound, my father didn't do and couldn't do. So I feel like reparenting in business, you have to identify the areas where the inner child is running your work life. And then that is where you start to put your reparenting efforts, like really doubling down on it. Because part of what is going to help you do when you write down, we're going to do this little inventory of where you think your inner child might be running the show in your business life. It will help you be able to recognize when these childhood patterns are driving your decisions, because of course that's not what we want. Obviously, we don't want a 7-year-old making decisions about our budget for next year, because that does not make any sense. As you build your business or build your career, continually integrating healing work, because at every level of success that you reach, you will have other comfort zones to reach out of. You know what I mean? That, think about things that were the things I'm doing now. At one point 20 years ago, this was a dream. Once I understood it could even be a thing you could do, right? Of being fluent on camera or being able to speak enough to have a whatever the skills are that I've gained over the last 20 years. Like, we have to think about how far we've come, right? Because I feel like when the child's in charge, it's like the little kid forgets all of that and just feels afraid, right? So as we integrate this healing work on your evolutionary path, every level you get to, there'll be new challenges, but also new joys and new adventures and new excitement, and your life being enlivened in new ways because you're doing stuff outside of your comfort zone. So to get the guide and everything I just talked about, go to terricole.com/guide. I want to hear from you. Can you pinpoint? Were you able to pinpoint the areas of your work life where the little kid might still be running the show? So drop me a comment either on my blog or I'll be putting this up on Instagram. I really want to hear from you guys. I hope so much that this gave you an aha moment or some kind of epiphany that will help you lessen your own suffering and elevate your own joy. And as always, my friends, take care of you.